Black CEO denied a room at her own hotel. What she did next shocked everyone. An elderly black woman stepped into the lobby. No makeup, worn shoes, a linen shirt, and slow, quiet grace. Staff glanced and dismissed her. She didn't look like a guest, but this wasn't just any woman. She was the founder, and today she'd remind them who truly belongs. She was turned away. There was no apology, no eye contact, and no idea who she was, just another black woman in worn sneakers asking for a room. What the clerk didn't know was this: the woman she'd just rejected, quiet, tired, unfancy, was the very founder of the hotel. But this isn't a story about mistaken identity. It's about something more profound, something crueler. What if the person who judged them by their clothes built the ground they stood on? What if the woman they shamed was your mother? That night, justice didn't knock. It walked in, quiet, unannounced, black, and it was watching. When she walked through the hotel's glass doors that bore her name, the sun had barely begun to set behind the magnolia-lined streets of Jackson, Mississippi. No one turned their head. No one offered a greeting. She didn't wear a badge or a designer suit, no pearl earrings, no polished heels, just a linen blouse, black sneakers, and a tired expression. And in the eyes of the young white receptionist, that was enough to decide who she must be. "I'm sorry, we're fully booked," the receptionist said without checking the system or asking for a name. Lavinia Hartwell paused. She looked past the girl to the hotel monitor, which was flashing green lights. Availability. She looked at the polished floors, where she had once walked barefoot during late-night construction. After rejecting a dozen others, she looked at the chandeliers she'd personally approved. And then she looked back at the receptionist, who didn't recognize the woman who had designed this hotel, funded it, and built it room by room. Lavinia didn't speak right away. Not because she was shocked. She wasn't. She had seen this story unfold her entire life. Her mother had scrubbed the floors of places like this, places she could clean, but never stay. Lavinia had seen her mother dismissed with the same smile this young woman was now wearing. Thin, rehearsed, quietly confident that some people simply didn't belong. That memory rose now like steam from a long closed wound. "You can try the motel across the street," the receptionist offered, her voice flat, practiced. Justice didn't knock. It stepped through the front door wearing sneakers. Lavinia could have announced herself. She could have pulled out an ID or asked for the manager. But she didn't. She stepped back. She watched. Because what mattered wasn't that she was turned away. What mattered was how easily the decision had been made. Later, people would say the clerk didn't mean it, but that it was policy, that it was a misunderstanding. But those who've lived it know the truth. When you look like Lavinia did that night, black, dressed plain, walking alone, you are often judged before you speak. And that night, Lavinia didn't just walk into her hotel. She walked into the proof. Not just biased, but of how deeply it hides in plain sight. The kind of truth you don't confront with outrage. You confront it with legacy. The lobby of the Magnolia Crest shimmered with curated elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast amber light across marble floors, and crystal chandeliers suspended like frozen fireworks. It was a place meant to impress, and it often did. But in that moment, the space felt more like a stage than a sanctuary. Emma Harris, young and composed, sat behind the front desk in a perfectly pressed blazer 2 sizes too large. Her smile was the kind taught in training videos. Precise, polite, but hollow. She barely glanced up when the woman entered. The woman's shoes were worn, her travel bag scuffed, and the road creased her linen blouse. Her hat cast a shadow over most of her face. She did not carry a phone or a platinum card. She didn't look like she belonged. "Evening," the woman said softly. I'd like a room for the night. A suite, if one's available. Emma's eyes flicked from the woman's face to her clothes, the bag at her feet, and back again. Her fingers danced over the keyboard. I'm sorry, ma'am. We're fully booked. There's a convention in town, she said without checking. The woman turned her head slowly toward the glowing wall display behind Emma. It clearly showed 5 rooms available. At first, she said nothing, just letting the silence stretch. Are you sure? She asked gently. The screen says otherwise. Emma stiffened. It hasn't updated yet. System lag, she lied, her voice clipped. The woman nodded once, absorbing it. Then, with a grace that masked the ache in her spine, she reached into her bag and retrieved her wallet, old leather, folded at the edges. She opened it. Inside, a single black and white photo peeked out. A woman in a maid's uniform, holding a mop, smiling despite it all. My mother used to clean floors just like these, she said quietly, eyes not leaving Emma. She was once told the same thing. Emma looked up, finally unsettled, but it was too late. She worked without praise, never asked for favors, just did her job, and she taught me one thing above all else. Never let anyone make you feel smaller because of how you look when you walk through the door. Emma blinked, but the woman had already stepped away, leaving her silence behind like perfume. Seconds later, Lionel Brooks appeared from the side hallway, broad-shouldered, calculating, his voice slicing the air. Ma'am, he barked, not recognizing the woman either. You need to leave if you're not a guest. We don't allow loitering. The woman looked up this time, and the fire in her eyes returned. And yet, she said, you work in a place with my name on the door. Lavinia Hartwell didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She turned slowly from the counter, her eyes sweeping the grand lobby she had personally designed 2 decades ago. Every column, every chandelier, every stitch of velvet chosen to say, welcome. But now, under the sterile glow of polished luxury, it felt cold. Not because of the air conditioning. Because of how Emma Harris, the white receptionist, looked at her and then through her. No apology, no curiosity, just the assumption. Wrong clothes, wrong skin, wrong status. And when Lavinia caught sight of John Wilson berating a black employee near the staff corridor, her stomach clenched. His voice rang out across the lobby like a slap. You think this is a daycare, Tariq? Bringing your daughter here like that? You think guests pay to see this? The little girl, no older than 7, clutched a coloring book to her chest, eyes wide with fear. Tariq stood frozen, jaw tight, his apron stained from morning shifts, heart too full of shame to speak. Lavinia saw her mother in him then, silent, sturdy, humiliated. She stepped forward. Emma, still behind the desk, tried to recover. Ma'am, if you'd like, we can call a cab to another. But Lavinia was already dialing. 4 words. Call the team, now. Within minutes, a hush fell. Staff glanced over their shoulders, unsure. The founder hadn't been expected, especially not dressed like this, especially not witnessing this. She looked at Tariq and offered the faintest nod, a signal that she saw him, that she saw everything. Then she turned to Emma, voice calm but cutting. 5 rooms showing as available, and you sent me away? I didn't know who you were, and that's the problem. And with that, Lavinia Hartwell called for an emergency staff meeting. Not tomorrow, not next week, tonight. Because change, real change, doesn't wait until business hours. By 7:45 p.m., the staff lounge was complete. Not a single employee had left their post out of routine. Still, each had arrived now with one unshakable question. Why did the founder call an emergency meeting, unannounced, unplanned, and unfiltered? Lavinia Hartwell entered without preamble. There was no assistant, no clipboard, just her quiet steps echoing off the tile. Her hair was slightly windblown from the walkover, and her linen shirt was still loose from travel. And yet, in that room, she looked like a general preparing for war with truth. She didn't stand at the head of the table. She stood in the center of the room, eyes passing over each face. "Tariq Carter," she said softly. He stood up, nervous. His daughter had been taken to the back office to rest. "I owe you more than an apology," Lavinia began. "What I saw today was not an isolated moment. It was a mirror, and it shattered." She turned toward John Wilson. "You've worked here 8 years, managed for 5, but tonight you forgot what service means. That title on your badge, it doesn't mean power. It means responsibility." John looked down, silent. Lavinia continued. "When I walked in tonight, dressed like a woman who doesn't fit your idea of success, I was judged and turned away. Discarded. Not because I was rude or loud or unprofessional, but because my clothes didn't speak the language of wealth." Her voice cracked once, but only barely. "And when I saw Tariq humiliated for choosing his daughter over silence, it took me back." She paused. "My mother scrubbed floors in Jackson. She was spit on once by a woman in heels who said she smelled like hard work, but she never flinched. She told me, 'Baby, when the world doesn't see you, see yourself anyway.'" Lavinia let the weight sit in the room. "This hotel bears my name, but tonight, it did not bear my values." Then came her following words, clear, resolute. "Effective immediately, we are creating a new department. It's called Human Dignity and Emergency Response. If your child's school closes, if your parent is rushed to the ER, if your world is falling apart, we will stand with you, not against you." The room was still, but hearts had moved, and change had begun. By morning, word had already spread. The kitchen was quieter than usual. Housekeeping moved more gently. Even the bellhops, usually light-hearted and joking in the staff hallway, walked with reverence. Something had shifted at Magnolia Crest, not in procedure but in pulse. At 9 a.m. sharp, the lobby filled again, not with guests but staff. Lavinia stood beside the new temporary bulletin board on the employee entrance. At its center, a single sheet of paper. Not typed, not framed, just written by hand. It read, "No one at Magnolia Crest will be judged by what they wear, how they look, or where they come from. We see people here." Beside it, a photograph of Tariq holding his daughter's tiny hand near the front desk. Both are looking ahead. John Wilson was not present. He had been quietly reassigned to the logistics center off-property, not as punishment, but to remove him from the daily guest experience until more profound empathy could take root. Lavinia addressed the gathered team. "We won't fix it all today, but culture," she said, "is what we choose when no one's watching." Then she announced a scholarship. "The Carter Fund," she said, "for the children of hourly staff, for the daughters who wait in lobbies and the sons who dream in back offices." Tariq didn't speak. He couldn't. He simply wept quietly, a proud man with no armor left, only gratitude. But Lavinia wasn't done. "There's more," she said. "We're launching monthly listening circles. No uniforms, no titles, just stories. If we don't hear each other, we'll repeat each other's pain." She paused. "This hotel will no longer be known only for polished marble and 5-star plates. We will be famous for something far rarer from this day forward." A young server asked softly, "For what, ma'am?" Lavinia looked around at janitors, receptionists, line cooks, and security guards, and said, "For being human, and never forgetting that's the highest standard we'll ever serve." 3 months later, a guest from New York checked in wearing an old hoodie and carrying a plastic bag. No one blinked. He was greeted by name, offered water, and escorted to a junior suite that had been upgraded at no charge. He later wrote in his review, This hotel made me feel like somebody again. Like I mattered. I haven't felt that in years. That review went viral. Not because it was flashy, but because it was true. By early spring, Magnolia Crest had become more than a hotel. A symbol. Churches in Georgia referenced it from their pulpits. Professors in Chicago assigned case studies on it. Veterans spoke of it as a place they felt safe for the first time in a decade. And quietly, behind the front desk, Emma Harris, the once dismissive receptionist, was different too. No longer guarded or judgmental, she had become the mentor for newer hires. She now carried laminated cards in her pocket with 3 words: look, listen, welcome. Each new employee was handed one on their first day. Tariq Carter, now promoted to Guest Experience Coordinator, led team huddles with stories, not checklists. Every Tuesday morning, he'd open the floor. Tell me who moved you this week. And the stories came of an elderly guest who cried when someone remembered her late husband's name, of a janitor who noticed a boy in tears and brought him cookies from the kitchen, and of front desk staff helping a guest navigate cancer treatment paperwork in silence, without a word of pity. The Human Moments board in the employee lounge filled up so fast that they had to add another one. Then, in April of 2024, Time magazine released its annual list. At number 1, Magnolia Crest, Hotel of the Year. Not for its luxury, but for its legacy. When asked for comment, Lavinia Hartwell, now 81, simply said, "If I built anything worth remembering, it's not these walls. It's what happened inside them." 3 months later, a guest from New York checked in wearing an old hoodie and carrying a plastic bag. No one blinked. He was greeted by name, offered water, and escorted to a junior suite that had been upgraded at no charge. He later wrote in his review, "This hotel made me feel like somebody again, like I mattered. I haven't felt that in years." That review went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was true. By early spring, Magnolia Crest had become more than a hotel, a symbol. Churches in Georgia referenced it from their pulpits. Professors in Chicago assigned case studies on it. Veterans spoke of it as a place they felt safe for the first time in a decade. And quietly, behind the front desk, Emma Harris, the once dismissive receptionist, was different too. No longer guarded or judgmental, she had become the mentor for newer hires. She now carried laminated cards in her pocket with 3 words: look, listen, welcome. Each new employee was handed one on their first day. Tariq Carter, now promoted to Guest Experience Coordinator, led team huddles with stories, not checklists. Every Tuesday morning, he'd open the floor. Tell me who moved you this week. And the stories came of an elderly guest who cried when someone remembered her late husband's name, a janitor who noticed a boy in tears and brought him cookies from the kitchen, and front desk staff helping a guest navigate cancer treatment paperwork in silence, without a word of pity. The Human Moments board in the employee lounge filled up so fast that they had to add another one. Then, in April of 2024, Time magazine released its annual list. At number 1, Magnolia Crest, Hotel of the Year. Not for its luxury, but for its legacy. When asked for comment, Lavinia Hartwell, now 81, simply said, "If I built anything worth remembering, it's not these walls. It's what happened inside them." It was a Sunday morning in June when Lavinia Hartwell passed away peacefully in her sleep. At home, sunlight falling gently across the folded hands that had built so much. The news spread quietly, then suddenly, everywhere. By noon, flowers had started arriving at Magnolia Crest's front steps. By dusk, they were piled waist-high. Guests cried, housekeepers prayed, and former employees flew in from 3 states away. And that evening, in the hotel's quiet courtyard, a spontaneous vigil formed. No announcements, no press, just candles, silence, and stories whispered like psalms. Tariq Carter stood near the edge, his daughter now taller, holding his hand. Standing beside them, Emma Harris held a laminated card that Lavinia had signed just last month. Across the top, "Kindness never goes out of style." No one wanted to leave. The next morning, a letter appeared on the staff bulletin board. It had been written long before. "To my Magnolia family," it began, "I built this place for you, and I leave it to you, not the building, not the name, but the heartbeat inside it, the courage to see people, the grace to let them be seen." The last line read, "May you never forget that service is not about smiling, it's about meaning it." In the following weeks, guests arrived not just for the rooms or the rooftop view, but to experience something they couldn't quite put their finger on. Love, maybe. Respect. Humanity. The scholarship fund Lavinia started grew tenfold. Tariq's daughter was the first recipient. She wants to study hospitality now, not because of the business, but because of what her father taught her. The importance of dignity. A small plaque was placed inside the lobby in late summer. Simple, unpolished brass. It read, "Welcome. You belong here. Lavinia Hartwell." And so, they did. From then on, no one ever walked into Magnolia Crest without being truly seen. Not judged, not sized up. Seen. Because at Magnolia Crest, the walls whispered a different kind of promise. Here, your story mattered. It was a Sunday morning in June when Lavinia Hartwell passed away peacefully in her sleep. At home, sunlight falling gently across the folded hands that had built so much. The news spread quietly. Then, suddenly, everywhere. By noon, flowers had started arriving at Magnolia Crest's front steps. By dusk, they were piled waist-high. Guests cried, housekeepers prayed, and former employees flew in from 3 states away. And that evening, in the hotel's quiet courtyard, a spontaneous vigil formed. No announcements, no press. Just candles, silence, and stories whispered like psalms. Tariq Carter stood near the edge, his daughter now taller, holding his hand. Standing beside them, Emma Harris held a laminated card that Lavinia had signed just last month. Across the top, "Kindness never goes out of style." No one wanted to leave. The next morning, a letter appeared on the staff bulletin board. It had been written long before. "To my Magnolia family," it began, "I built this place for you, and I leave it to you, not the building, not the name, but the heartbeat inside it, the courage to see people, the grace to let them be seen." The last line read, "May you never forget that service is not about smiling, it's about meaning it." In the following weeks, guests arrived not just for the rooms or the rooftop view, but to experience something they couldn't quite put their finger on. Love, maybe. Respect. Humanity. The scholarship fund Lavinia started grew tenfold. Tariq's daughter was the first recipient. She wants to study hospitality now, not because of the business, but because of what her father taught her. The importance of dignity. A small plaque was placed inside the lobby in late summer. Simple, unpolished brass. It read, "Welcome. You belong here. Lavinia Hartwell." And so, they did. From then on, no one ever walked into Magnolia Crest without being truly seen. Not judged, not sized up. Seen. Because at Magnolia Crest, the walls whispered a different kind of promise. Here, your story mattered. The conference room at Magnolia Crest was silent, save for the low hum of the ceiling fan. 6 staff members sat in a semicircle. Emma Harris fidgeted with her pen. John Wilson crossed his arms defensively. Tariq Carter sat quietly, his daughter napping on a chair outside the glass wall. Nia Bell, from laundry, had folded her apron neatly on her lap. Lionel Brooks stood behind them, unsure if he should sit. Lavinia Hartwell didn't raise her voice. She stood at the head of the room, not in a power suit, but in the same linen shirt she wore when Emma turned her away. Her voice was soft, but every syllable hit like truth cutting through velvet. "When I was 7, she began, I watched my mother clean homes of wealthy white families. I saw her bow her head when they called her lazy or accused her of stealing what they had more than enough of. She never yelled. She just worked harder, and I promised myself that I would build something better, a place where no one's dignity could be priced by appearance." She paused, letting the weight settle. "I didn't build Magnolia Crest for the rich. I built it for the tired traveler, the single mother, the man trying to provide, the woman who dares to dream." Her gaze swept across the room. "Emma, what did you see when you looked at me yesterday? A woman with worn shoes? A black face that didn't fit your picture of a paying guest?" Emma opened her mouth. No words came. "John," she said next, "when you shouted at Tariq in front of guests, what message did you send? That being a father a failure? That his daughter, a child, had no place in a space we claimed was built for hospitality?" John shifted. No apology came. Lavinia nodded. "This is not about one incident. It's about culture. And starting tonight, it changes." Silence. Heavy. Necessary. And then she said what no one expected. "I'm not here to fire anyone tonight. I'm here to teach you why this place exists, so no one else has to feel what I felt yesterday. Or what my mother felt every day of her life." Tariq, still quiet, looked down at his hands. But now, they no longer shook. This wasn't discipline. It was awakening. The morning after the meeting, the sun broke over Magnolia Crest with unusual softness, as if the sky knew something had shifted. Staff trickled in, murmuring about what had happened the night before. No one knew what would come next, until Tariq Carter's name echoed from the PA system. "Mr. Tariq Carter, please report to the Grand Lobby." Tariq hesitated. He had just finished polishing the brass railings, and his hands were still damp with polish. His daughter clung to the hem of his shirt, unsure. When he stepped into the lobby, he froze. There, beneath the crystal chandelier, stood Lavinia Hartwell. Lionel Brooks and Nia Bell stood beside her. A small crowd of staff had gathered. Emma Harris stood toward the back, her expression unreadable. Lavinia turned to the assembled group and spoke into a slender mic, her voice low but unwavering. "Last night reminded me why this hotel exists. It is not just about serving guests. It is about honoring people. And today we honor one of our own." She looked at Tariq. "You came to work with your daughter, not because you didn't care, but because you care too much. You worked with dignity, in silence, while being humiliated. And you never lost your commitment to serve." She reached out and held up a framed certificate. "For your compassion, grace under pressure, and unwavering heart, you are this month's recipient of the Magnolia Crest Humanity in Service Award." The lobby burst into quiet applause, not loud, but sincere. Tariq's hands trembled as he took the frame. His daughter hugged his leg, then looked up as Lavinia knelt. "And for you, sweetheart," she said gently, "a full education scholarship sponsored by this hotel, because your father just raised the standard of what leadership looks like." The girl gasped. Tariq blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like just a server. He felt seen. He felt proud. And so did everyone watching. The room was quiet enough to hear the soft whir of the air conditioning. John Wilson stood near the window, staring at a palm tree swaying outside as if it could offer him an escape. Emma Harris sat upright but rigid, her eyes fixed on the conference table, lips pressed so tightly together they nearly disappeared. Both had been summoned, but neither honestly expected what was coming. Lavinia Hartwell didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. She entered the room like a still wave, calm, but impossible to ignore. She sat down across from them, opened a thin leather folder, and placed it gently on the table. "There are moments," she began, her voice soft but razor-sharp, "when a single gesture tells me everything I need to know about a person." Her gaze locked on John first. "I watched you humiliate a man in front of his daughter, not because he raised his voice, not because he failed at his job, but because you assumed your position gave you the right to belittle him. You saw a black man with a child and thought unprofessional, not father." John swallowed, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. Lavinia leaned forward. "You forgot what this industry is built on. Dignity, service, grace. You'll be moved to back-of-house operations, where you will relearn humility, not as punishment, but as a reminder of what it feels like to work in the shadows." Then she turned to Emma. The younger woman flinched slightly under her gaze. "You looked at me, dressed simply, and decided I didn't belong here. You didn't check my name, didn't look past my clothes. Just a black woman. Probably can't afford the night, probably doesn't tip." Emma's throat tightened. Lavinia didn't blink. "You will undergo intensive retraining, cultural literacy, bias recognition, guest empathy, not to shame you, but to save you from becoming the kind of person this industry cannot afford anymore." The silence stretched, and then Lavinia closed the folder. "We don't fire people to cleanse our conscience," she said. "We rebuild them, if they're willing. That's how we keep the soul of Magnolia Crest alive." At that moment, neither John nor Emma felt punished. They felt seen, and that changed everything. The next morning, long before the Florida sun crested over the horizon, Lavinia Hartwell sat in her office with a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a resignation letter. It wasn't a press release. It was a proposal, one she had written by hand. The top read, "Human Response Division, because life doesn't ask for permission." She knew the hotel industry could be brutal, schedules tight, emotions tighter, but real life didn't operate on shift hours. Illnesses didn't wait for day offs. Accidents didn't consult HR. She brought the idea to Lionel Brooks, the branch manager. He read it once, then again, slower. By the time he looked up, his voice was hushed. This changes everything." By week's end, the Magnolia Crest Human Response Division was born, a dedicated team trained not in spreadsheets, but in grace, urgency, and decency. Their mandate was clear. We provide coverage when an employee's child becomes ill. We adjust when a single mother needs a midday break for school pickup. When tragedy strikes, a brother in a car crash, a grandmother on her last breath, we don't ask for proof. We ask, "What do you need?" It wasn't about bending the rules. It was about rewriting the ones who had forgotten the humans they were meant to serve. A bulletin board was installed beside the time clock, titled Moments That Matter. There, anonymous stories were pinned. "I was allowed to leave early for my son's seizure. He's okay now. Thank you." They covered my shift when I had to testify at my cousin's accident trial. They remembered my anniversary. I didn't think anyone would. Staff began arriving early just to read the board. Something was shifting. Magnolia Crest was no longer just known for its skyline view or five-star cuisine. It was becoming known for showing up, not just for guests, but for its own. A former Magnolia intern stood up and read from a crumpled paper. She taught us that hospitality isn't about towels folded into swans. It's about never folding your values, even when no one's watching. No one left early. Tariq Carter spoke last. His voice was low, steady. She saw people, not titles, not colors, just people. He paused, then added, "And in seeing us, she reminded us to see each other." Outside the chapel, the sun dipped low over the Mississippi horizon. For a moment, the wind carried something gentle, as if the earth itself exhaled in gratitude. The old brass sign outside Magnolia Crest, had long read, "Welcome to Magnolia Crest. Excellence in every stay." However, weeks after Lavinia Hartwell's memorial, a new sign was unveiled, not by an executive, but by a housekeeper and a bellhop, both dressed in pressed uniforms and eyes brimming with pride. Etched in deep brushed steel, the new words shimmered under the morning sun. "Welcome to Magnolia Crest, where rooms are just the beginning. Here, you are seen. You are safe. You are home." Below it, in smaller script, "You may walk in as a guest, but leave as part of the family." Tourists paused to take photos, and locals slowed their steps. Former guests returned, not to book a room but just to stand in front of the sign. Some smiled, and others cried. Inside, the front desk buzzed with warmth. Emma Harris now greeted every guest with a softened and deepened tone. Tariq Carter trained a new intern at the concierge desk, placing a hand on their shoulder. "We don't just serve," he said. "We remember." And from a quiet hallway behind it all, a portrait of Lavinia watched over them, no longer just the founder of a hotel, but the heartbeat of its legacy. The story you'll carry forever. Not every story changes the world, but some change how you see it, forever. A woman walked into her hotel and was turned away because she didn't look the part. A father brought his daughter to work and was humiliated by her presence. What they wore, the color of their skin, and the assumptions made about them by others. But instead of revenge, there was reform. Instead of shouting, there was grace. And from quiet courage came a legacy. Magnolia Crest didn't just offer rooms, it offered respect. Now, it's your turn. When someone walks into your life, will you judge what you see or honor who they are? If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe. Leave a comment below. When was the last time someone saw you, beyond the surface? Thank you for listening. And remember, kindness never goes out of style, and the best part of any place is the people inside it.